Fear Not, Episode 17. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by Nancy Sharp. Welcome, Nancy. Are you ready to fear not today?
Yes, I am.
Nancy Sharp was born and raised in the East Coast, but it was the loss of her husband to brain cancer in 2004 that led Nancy to leave New York for Denver, Colorado. She moved there with her then 5-year-old twins in order to get away from the years of illness and mourning that had eclipsed her identity. In Colorado, she began to breathe deeply again, distill her experience, and write it in the powerful memoir, Both Sides Now, a true story of love, loss, and bold living. The recipient of 8 literary honors, including Books for a Better Life, a National Indie Excellence Award, and the Colorado Book Award, Both Sides Now offers universal lessons on what it means to hold life and death, joy and sorrow, health and illness, and past and present all at once. Nancy's work has also been published in The Best Advice in 6 Words and numerous national magazines. Forthcoming in 2017 is a children's picture book titled Because the Sky is Everywhere, inspired by real conversations and dreams had by Nancy's twins. When Nancy isn't writing, she's busy speaking to groups nationwide about the paradox of loss and gain, resilience, and what it takes to build a path forward when life changes. Nancy, can you take a few minutes and fill in the gaps and maybe give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for having me on the show. My life is very different than it was a decade ago when I first came to Colorado. I mean, when I first came here, I couldn't really see the path ahead. My life was very up in the air, and everything was sort of ripe for change. And everything felt like an adventure. So today, a decade later, I'm a lot more settled in my life, thank goodness. And I've really built a life for myself in Denver, for myself and my children who are no longer in elementary school. As a matter of fact, they just started high school this year. So life is very different. I also remarried 8 years ago to a gentleman who I met in Denver, who was a TV news anchor at the time, who had also been widowed with 2 children. And he was featured in a prominent Denver magazine as one of Denver's most eligible singles. And I thought it was very interesting that we had a similar story. He too had lost his spouse to cancer and was raising 2 children. And I decided to reach out to him and to send him an email and a photo in the hopes that maybe we could be friends, never imagining in all my wildest dreams that we would end up getting married. So my life is very different today. And, we've blended our families. We've got 4 children, my twins, who, as I said, are 15, just started high school, and his boys, who are 23 and 25. Life is very full.
I know a lot of your work deals with being bold, which is sort of the opposite of fear, or rather a counterpoint. So maybe you could explain to us what your idea of fear is, and maybe you could share with one of the biggest fears that you've had to face and tell us what you did to overcome it.
Okay. I mean, I think that the ultimate manifestation of fear means the inability to move forward in any way. For me, my husband was sick a number of years, and then he died, and I had all kinds of fears. First of all, before he died, because I was fearing the worst, knowing that it was going to happen, and I live with a lot of anticipatory fear. I think the real fear beyond just losing him, which was inevitable because certainly toward the latter part of his disease, we knew it was terminal. The real fear lay in being afraid and unsure about how I could still build a meaningful life, a hopeful life for myself and for my children in the midst of loss. So when I think about fear today, my programs and the coaching I do for groups about boldness, boldness has everything to do with moving beyond your fears, stepping beyond your fears and beginning to put yourself in the path of opportunity without worrying about the results. It's just the process of moving forward, I think, is the most important thing that we have to keep in mind when we think about what it means to move past our fears.
Could you explain a little bit more? Because I mean, it's not uncommon to hear people say you just need to face your fear and step into it, move past it. But in my own experience, and I think some people, that are listening today too, might get a little confused because you can step into it. But could you maybe walk us through the process so that we don't get fear of the process itself? Does that make sense? That it's a little bit more than just sort of stepping into it.
Right, right. No, of course, I was giving you a sort of a definition. So, I think what I hear you asking me to do is to break it down a little bit. And I want to say that it's a different process for everybody. We're all hardwired differently. And so the way I face my fears might be very different than the way Ron from Chicago faces his fears, just hypothetically. But I think that there is some common ground. I think that, first of all, it's imperative when you are faced with the fear, and let's go back to my example of building a meaningful life and being afraid, quite frankly, of how to build a meaningful life and what that might look like. I had to really allow myself to be in a place of fear for a long time before I could figure out how to see my way through it. So I have this program which is based on boldness, and it's kind of like breaks apart the tenets of boldness. And the very first step has to do with breakthrough thinking. And what that means is really challenging your fears and assumptions. But I don't think that it's fair or even certain that anybody is likely to move past their fears until they can sit in a place of fear. So that means, you don't drink your fears away. You don't kind of suppress them because they're going to come out anyways. It means allowing yourself to feel your fear is really what it means at first. And then when you have had enough and you realize that, you need to put an end cap on the fear if you're going to live a meaningful life, that's when I think that's really sort of the real moment when change can happen. So that first opportunity really has to do with breakthrough thinking, a breakaway and breakthrough thinking, and really learning to see beyond your current lens. That's really how I ended up changing my life and moving to Colorado to begin again, because I was living with so much fear in New York City. And it was like it had me by the neck. And I knew that there was no way I was going to make a life for myself staying put in New York City. I had to learn to see the world through a different lens. And once you begin to challenge your old assumptions and your old focal points and begin to really expand your vision in the world, you can then begin to seize opportunities, which is the second tenet of bold. And that has everything to do with understanding that you can't wait for life to happen. You have to make life happen. That means going out there and putting yourself in the path of direct opportunity, just because you know that that's essential to moving forward. I think too many people are fearful about, putting themselves in opportunities if they can't see the direct results. I'll give you a good example. I know a lot of people who are afraid to network when it comes to looking for new careers or new jobs. And they're afraid to network because they feel, well, why should I just go talk to this person if there's no actual job? It's a great example, really, because how do you know? I mean, how do you know that there's not going to be a job or that person isn't going to keep you in mind for something else down the road? That's just an excuse as far as I'm concerned. So seizing opportunities is really, really important. The third tenet of bold has to do with integrating liveliness and cultivating a spirit of liveliness, which is all about making the past a part of the present. It is all about taking those lessons of failure and of rejection, of setbacks, of disappointments, and of kind of folding them into the present so that you can really begin to integrate everything that has happened to you or not. And I say the or not because a lot of times it's not just the things that have happened to us that make us feel fearful, but sometimes we feel fearful about the things that haven't happened to us because maybe we're afraid we aren't really living or working to our full potential. And finally, the fourth and last tenet of bold is about practicing the daring path forward, which is different than mining outside opportunities. Practicing the daring path forward, the way I see it, really is all about igniting that inner spark, those inner resources that all of us have that look different for all of us and that for whatever reason sometimes get a little muddled because of our fears. And it really just means finding the way forward and going for it no matter what.
Can you sort of explain too, maybe, because sometimes clarity is not always clear, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're going through that fear and you're trying to find that clear path, very much like you were saying that you know what you thought
Yes,
Colorado held for you.
Mud for a long time.
Yeah. So how do you learn to distinguish from mud from light, if you will?
Well, I don't, and I wish I could say this is what everybody needs. It's different for everybody. It just is. It is a layered process. Sometimes, you might hear an interview. Sometimes you might hear the words of a poem. Sometimes, I'll give you an example. The other day I was listening to a podcast of one of my favorite programs, Christy Tippett's program on being. And, it's a wonderful program where she interviews all kinds of thought leaders and experts and influencers. And this particular interview is with Thich, the famous Buddhist monk. And he was talking about how, the lotus flower, which is a symbol of peace and growth, it actually grows in mud. I thought that was kind of interesting, that it's a symbol of beauty and yet it grows in mud. So it's just a way of learning to be open to possibility. So, you get it where you get it. Maybe you're feeling horrible and then you look out and you see a bird and suddenly, you're watching the bird flit from tree to tree and it makes you happy. And without knowing why, something subtle inside of you shifts. Maybe you hear some music that is absolutely stirring, or music stirring for your soul, or music that just makes you happy or reminds you of a pleasing memory from the past. Maybe you just have a delicious meal, or you cook a delicious meal, and it fills you. So there's no cut and clear answer for finding clarity, but I think that it is important to know that clarity will be revealed, because most of us, if we stew in our problems and in our fears long enough, we're going to reach a point where we've had enough. And we're going to recognize that something has to change, something has to give. And usually that's our mindsets.
Could you maybe challenge us, give us something to do this week that we could start implementing that's maybe part of your program?
Yeah.
Sort of challenges? Give us a little homework assignment.
All right. I like that idea. Well, I'm going to challenge everybody to reframe some of their fears. So what I'd like for you to do is to think about 2 or 3, but no more, fears, big fears or small fears that you might have. And I'd like you to write them down and I'd like you to put them in a bowl, and then I'd like you to wait a day. And the reason why I'm asking you to wait a day before you pick them up again is because something may have shifted within the span of that day, so that when you pick the fears up the next day, I want you to begin to reframe them a little bit. You could even, if it helps you, take a frame. Take a frame that you have, an old picture frame, and take 3 if you've got 3 fears, or 2 if you've got 2 fears, and put what you wrote the day before, your primal fear, on this frame, and look at it. And then I'd like you to stand back from that frame or those frames and to think about how you can change your posture and how you can reframe that fear. So can you throw out an example of something that one of your listeners you think might be a common fear for people?
We could stick with the fear of conversing. That's pretty universal.
Yeah. So let's see. If you've got a fear of starting a conversation, to reframe, that fear, might be as simple as, what do I have to lose? Or what could, what if this conversation leads me somewhere else? And what if the conversation leads me to someone else who I actually might lead me on a new career opportunity? I've had that happen more times than not. I mean, just today I was conversing with my bookkeeper, and we were talking about different things, and he's a hard person to converse with. I don't know why, he just is. And I can pretty much talk to anybody, but he's not that easy to engage with. And this was kind of on my mind before he came over to do my books. And I just decided that I was going to approach today differently with him. And I decided that instead of knowing and sort of treating him and engaging with him from the vantage point that he's difficult to speak to, I decided to try a different approach, and I just decided to engage him and ask him questions and ask him even his advice on a speaking matter. And, wouldn't you know, he started opening up, and he actually gave me the name of a person that he wants me to talk to who actually has a similar story to me, who hosts a bunch of events in Arizona. So you never know, really.
Being bold has its payoffs.
Well, being bold definitely has its payoffs. And I think the most important thing, though, is to assert oneself without expectation that you're going to get something in return, or that you're going to get a specific something in return. You just don't know where bold is going to take you. You just don't. You don't know where a bold conversation is going to lead you, or where a bold truth is going to maybe put you on the path toward discovery, or where a bold kindness towards somebody opens up an unexpected opportunity. You just don't know. And that's hard for people, because I think so many of us, we want certainty, right? We want certainty. And what I'm trying to encourage listeners to do is to be bold without worrying about the results.
Security, certainty, those are all
black and white. I don't,
and it's fear. It's fear.
It's fear. Fear keeps us it's easier for us to wrap our heads around black and white than it is to live in a state of nuanced gray. But I can tell you, after my experience, my really hard experience, which was a decade of caregiving and mourning, I no longer live life the way I used to. I do not live in extremes. I am most comfortable and most secure in the world when I can embrace that state of gray, because that's truer to life.
Could you share with us a resource or two that you've come across that might help us in our own journey in dealing and facing fear?
Well, I'm going to give another plug to Krista Tippett. I don't even know her. But I really do love that show. I have to tell you, I walk a lot. And for me, walking is a way of moving through fears. So I think that's an easy resource that anybody can do. I mean, anybody. I mean, you can walk up and down your driveway if you have to. You can make your own labyrinth, in, or in your backyard. But I lately, and this is just me lately. This hasn't always been true for me, but I really enjoy listening to like a meditative podcast and hearing the words of somebody else and just allowing what comes to me to come to me. And I find that very inspiring and empowering. And I always take something. It's like you don't have to pay attention to every single word and worry about taking notes. But I'm almost suggesting is walk to somebody else's words who inspires you, or walk to music that inspires you, and just see how you feel. I mean, the other thing, aside from walking, is writing, quite frankly. Writing is a wonderful catalyst for getting to the heart of one's fears. Whenever I'm really feeling stuck about a problem or a situation, I write. And inevitably, when I write about it, a lot of gunk comes out, and I typically find clarity from letting all that gunk out on the page. So walking and writing, and especially meditative walking, and writing in a journal would really be, and free form writing, and I don't mean an outline or, anything too constrained. I mean really write from your subconscious.
Do you have any parting advice for us today?
Be bold. Be bold in all of your pursuits, and put yourself on the path of opportunity without worrying where those opportunities are going to lead you. Just allow yourself to keep stepping forward in life.
That's really great advice. Thank you. And I want to thank you so much today, Nancy, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure and a great honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.